inspired by some of the conversations that I had publicly. That said, I'm not enlightened. I'm not even sure I know what the word means. I'm still
Yeah.
very much a person, still very much here, still very much a creature of various desires and things that I chase. And, honestly, I'm kind of enjoying life. So it's hard for me to leave it. It's hard for me to sort of check out of myself
Yeah.
when I'm having fun winning the various games that I've played and I continue to play. And I don't think you're completely out of it either, frankly. Like
No, I
yeah,
don't. I'm not.
yeah, like you'd like to, what is it? The three big drivers. There's money, there's sex or children, depending on where you are in that on that track, and fame. And I think you're still at some level, um, maybe not craving. Craving is the wrong word, but you're at
No, I'm
least
I'm
open.
playing the games.
Yeah, you're open to those games.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway,
Yeah. The
I'm
the
not
way
sure
I
what
kind
the
of
heck
see
we're
it.
doing here. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Not the way. No, the way I see it is like you're here. You might as well do something. So pick a game that seems like fun and play it.
Exactly. And I think this all comes from a position of luxury. Like none of us are in a war zone. None of us are starving. None of us don't have are missing a roof over our heads. So, given that we're already pretty far up Maslow's hierarchy of needs from a historical perspective, it's kind of all gravy. Now, of course, there's expectations that each of us have built up within our character of where we ought to be. And when we fall short of those expectations, we're disappointed or unhappy or angry or feel all these various emotions. But it helps to step back and realize that you don't actually need any of that. That's just stuff that's layered on. And it's kind of
Hmm.
this manufactured personality on top that craves these things. But it's still a fun game to play because if you don't play that game, there's nothing else to do. It's just really boring.
Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
may as well enjoy it. Yeah.
I kind of the way I look at it is, you get to a point where you're say you're perfectly at peace. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit in a room and meditate for the rest of your life? Of course not. That I mean, quite frankly, that sounds really boring. So eventually, you have to get up and go do something. So you might as well do something that seems like fun.
Yeah, I mean, so I've actually cut down on my meditation recently. I enjoy meditating. It's fun when I do it. It's good, and it seems to have some value. But that said, every time I sit down to meditate, the first few minutes are always difficult in the sense that I want to get up and leave. And I realized like if meditation was easy, I'd do nothing else. I'd just sit there the whole time and just be in deep meditation. But there's that voice in my head that always keeps saying, okay, this is a waste of time. Okay, this is boring. Okay, are we done yet? What time is it? And if that voice didn't exist, I'd probably just rot on that chair and die. So it's probably a good thing that it exists.
It's interesting because that hasn't been my experience of it. I kind of because I was never a big meditator. I
Yeah,
had
you're not a meditator at all,
Yeah, I don't
as far as I
meditate
can
at
tell.
all
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
I did it for maybe 6 months and then I stopped. And I kind of went the route of self inquiry. And I'm very much at a point where if I want to, sit and have a quiet mind, it's very easy for me to get there. But I don't actually I think I've told you this before. I don't like walk around flexing that muscle, so to speak. Like I don't walk around trying to have no thoughts whatsoever because it just seems like a waste of effort or a waste of time to try and do that.
Well, it's
It's
also a failed struggle, right? Who is
Yeah,
it that's
exactly.
trying to not have a thought, and then the easiest way to have a thought is to try not to have that thought,
Yeah,
and there it is
exactly.
in your mind. Yeah. There's a Jed McKenna thing where he says like, if you don't want to get cancer, like don't think about cancer. Don't even think like I don't want cancer because just by thinking it, you're making it real. And the way the universe works is it doesn't know positive or negative. It's just whatever you're thinking about is where you end up. And I found that really disheartening because the moment he said that, I couldn't stop but think about cancer and all the terrible things, and I couldn't stop thinking about them. So
Yeah.
I can't believe that's true. I mean, it gets a little woo-woo the way he's
Hmm.
talking about, like whatever you think about is the way the universe works. Maybe that's true, but my experience has been no, it's not that the universe necessarily works that way. It's just that you work that way. Whatever you think about is what you focus in on. Like when you're driving a car, wherever you're looking is where you're going to end up driving, regardless of where you think you're turning the steering wheel to.
Yeah,
So,
I think that is much more accurate than a lot of what you read about like manifestation, for example. Like you look at people talking about manifestation as a way to try and get wealthy. Warren Buffett never talked about manifestation. Right? That that would be so out of character for him to talk about that, but he got wealthy. So I'm firmly convinced that part of manifestation, if there is such a thing, is the actual desire that you have to go out and do the things that create what you really want.
Yeah, actually, wealth creation in a modern technological society is the only thing on which I consider myself even a quasi-expert. Everything else I'm an amateur at, so I don't even know why people listen to me in the other stuff, other than the fact that, if you're successful and rich, people will listen to you on anything. They seem to think you're good at everything, so that's fine. I'll take the credit, but it's the only topic on which I feel qualified to talk about. So when we end up in these situations, I hate talking about spirituality because I don't even know what the heck it is. It's hard for me to define it, and it's hard to articulate it because I think it's a very personal thing. But I'm always happy to take questions on wealth creation. Should we bounce some people up here with questions about anything?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, as long as they're not rude. People have their hands up, so let's see. Who do you want to let up? Going through the list. I have to admit, I don't love it when people don't have any bios. I mean, what kind of psychopath has no bio? So let's just invite somebody up, see what they have to say.
Yeah.
Davies Omale Odu. Did I say that right?
Yes, hello everyone. How's
How
everyone
are
doing
you?
tonight? Good, good,
Good.
good. My question is generally around the practice of mindfulness meditation. I've been practicing for quite a few years now, about 3 years roughly. I fairly recently got introduced to a practice of like effortless, where you sit down and you essentially just let your mind settle, and you don't make any attempt at like observing thoughts. I'm really curious. Yeah, just generally what your thoughts are on effortful versus effortless, and whether it's worth yeah, just what's worked for you personally in terms of whether you choose objects to focus on while you aim to train your attention, or whether you generally just kind of, yeah, effortlessly let things flow. Just really curious what your thoughts
Okay.
are there.
Firstly,
Thank
I'm
you.
really disappointed that you aren't just trying to get rich, because I was I was so ready to answer that. But sure, meditation. I'll take a
Yeah.
stab at it, and then James, maybe if you want to go next.
Okay, sounds good.
So the meditation style that I've tried and practiced that worked for me was the effortless meditation. I was never able to make the effort-based forms work because I didn't have the patience and I couldn't sustain the effort. From what I understand, the effortless meditations are the so-called direct paths. They can work really well. You can do them for long periods of time. They aren't full of suffering because it's actually pretty easy to just let go. Um, and I think that they definitely do leave you quieter, more peace of mind, more happy, more in the moment, and sort of they automatically will lead you to moments where you're just observing or your mind is quiet, so they'll automatically take you to a witness state. That said, it's incredibly hard to articulate the benefits of meditation. It's one of those things that you just have to do, and you just have to do it for long enough that then one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I have a clearer mind, or I feel more peaceful. That said, I've done effortless meditation very regularly for years and years and years, and it still didn't lead me to any sort of ending breakthrough, where I was like, okay, now I'm done. Other than maybe I just got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I don't see the value in necessarily doing this all the time, and I'm much more interested nowadays into what I would say is just figuring things out at a certain level where they seem very, very true to me. And then naturally, my demeanor and outlook on life changes. So it's more peaceful, what I think James would call self inquiry. And I'm less interested in meditation, but I wouldn't take anything away from meditation. I think that it is incredibly useful. I think the so called effortless path is a natural one. And in a way, if you think about it, um, there can't be any technique because what if you were born in the wrong place at the wrong time? What if someone taught you the wrong technique? What if you just did it the wrong way? That doesn't seem right. It seems to me that whatever we're trying to access through meditation is sort of the base layer of consciousness, which is every human's birthright and is always there at all times. It's sort of almost like the base operating system for humanity, and it shouldn't need a special magic code or password or root password to access it. It should always be available. But I'm getting feedback from you, Davies. If you wouldn't mind muting for a moment. Um,
Sure.
Thank you. So, it should be accessible to anybody at any time. And what can anybody, anywhere, anytime do without instruction? And that is literally do nothing. It's the thing that is possible for everybody at all times. So I think if there is going to be a valid form of meditation, that certainly effortless meditation should be a valid form of meditation. Will meditation get you all the way there? Yeah, some people it does. For me, I'm a highly goal-oriented person, so I think at some point I just sort of realized that meditation, even though it was making me a little more calmer and a little more peaceful, it wasn't necessarily giving me the results that I wanted as quickly as I wanted. So I'm kind of more these days on the path of self-inquiry, although maybe that's just an excuse for laziness. I'll turn it over to James.
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head with what you said about the fact that you're trying to get to the base layer of consciousness, right? And so that is accessible anywhere at any time to any person. And by default, it can't require a technique because that's the base layer. Any technique takes you to some layer on top of that. You know, it's all of the things you're obsessed with in your day-to-day life, in your day-to-day, awareness, consciousness, whatever you want, your day-to-day attention, that takes you away from that in the first place. So, I mean, effortless meditation can be very useful, but I think that's kind of a half measure, because basically what that is it's saying I care enough to be effortlessly aware in every moment of my life, so I'm going to devote a few moments here and there where I can do that. So for some people it's very valuable, and that, for some people that's as far as they're willing to go. But I think it's much more productive or effective to kind of inquire into the things that occupy your mind on a day-to-day basis, and slowly and deliberately start to kind of pick at them until they come apart. And when they come apart, you naturally find yourself in a meditative state from day to day.
All right, I'm going to send you back, Davies. I'm going to pick the next person.
Awesome.
James,
Thanks so much for the
thank
insights,
you.
guys. Yeah, thank you.
James, if you see someone interesting out of the audience, just who has their hand raised, just pull them up. Otherwise, let's try. I don't understand how Clubhouse sorts people. I'm sure there's some method to it. Everything about this app is actually pretty well thought through, so I'm not blaming it. But I'm just curious what the actual sorting algorithm is. But okay, I'll just take it in the order that they're presenting it. So no judgment is expressed or implied. I'm literally just following Clubhouse here. Next. I invited somebody. Maybe they vanished. Oh, here we go. Edwin Marino. Hey, Edwin.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right. So this is a question about wealth. I am looking to build my wealth.
Yeah, I got this one. Sorry, James.
This might be tough because, all right, so I'm 38. I'm not a coder. I'm looking for ways to build wealth. Right now, what I do for income is I have a small digital agency, but that's just providing kind of like enough money just to live and to save. And I do a lot of investing in cryptocurrencies now, but I'm looking for that thing that I can be uniquely good at. And I just wanted your opinion. I really don't know where to go because I'm not really into code. YouTubing I've been considering, but I haven't developed a unique character for myself online. I did move abroad. I was born in the U.S. and I'm living in Vietnam now, and I'm considering starting a blog just to explore ideas, because I know you've recommended to just get into the practice of writing for self-discovery, but I'm kind of, creeping up there in age now, and it's just I'd love to get your take, and maybe you can tell me something that'll comfort me a little bit in my pursuit.
Well, okay, so it's the nature of truth that it's really comforting, so I have bad news for you there. If you're coming for comfort, you came to the wrong place. But that said, there is at least one or two things you're doing, I think, well. Three things stuck out. You said digital agency, you said crypto, and you said Vietnam. Well, that's kind of interesting. By the way, would you mind muting? I'm getting some feedback from you as well.
Okay, just a sec. How do I
Yeah.
mute?
There you go. Okay. So, digital agency, I think that implies that you have some creative talents or you're surrounded by people who have creative talents, which is good because creativity is the last frontier for humans. Vietnam means that you have access to cheap labor or relatively cheap labor that can then be applied globally. And then crypto, of course, is the current frontier. And if you look at where the great fortunes are made in human history, they're always made on the frontier. So there's a time when you need to be conquistador and you got in a boat, or you were Marco Polo and you went to the Orient, or you went to the Wild West, and you were panning for gold, or you went into software back when it was all hardware, or you went to internet when it was all software, or you went to crypto when it's all internet. And so the frontier is the place where you make money. And why is that? Because that's where the cops, the regulators, and the normies aren't quite there yet, and people haven't figured it out. And you're in the right place because it's full of brilliant people and full of scammers. It's full of completely genius ideas, and it's full of some of the worst ideas you've ever seen. It's full of incredible hyperbole, and it's full of incredible value. So crypto is that place today, and it is a frontier. So if you're operating crypto and you have access to cheap labor, and if you have access to high quality creative labor, then I think you're actually in a good place. So I don't think you're necessarily in a bad place. I think you may just need to dig a little bit deeper and stick it out. So I think you're kind of in a good area, but you need to navigate deeply into it until you find something that just clicks for you. It could be NFTs where you're like, wow, we can create our own batches of NFTs and do drops. It could be something around maybe farming NFTs for games. Like there's a big community in the Philippines, for example, that does work on Axie Infinity. There might be new games emerging. I can't predict for you. I can't tell you exactly what will be the right application for you, but I feel like if you kind of, what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't leave crypto. Because it is a frontier space. And the fact that you have a digital agency, I think, is a big asset. And the fact that you can apply those assets now across the world is a big deal. So I don't feel like you're in a bad place. I think you just need to dig a little bit deeper. And you don't necessarily need to put yourself out there through writing or through YouTube videos. One of the places where I feel like the self-help porn goes wrong, and I call it self-help porn because you can just read it all day long, is that it sort of says you should, like there are people on the internet who will say, you should be a writer, or even I'm guilty of this, you should be a coder. Well, you should be a writer or coder if that is your natural inclination, if that's what you're natural at. If you're not, don't do that. If you're good at talking to people, then go on Clubhouse. If you're good at sales, then go do sales. If you're good at organizing people, then go build a small company or recruit people or build a community. So you have to find the thing that feels effortless to you, but is not effortless to everybody else. So it like I've said before, it feels like play to you, but it looks like work to others. And I think you're kind of already on those vectors. So I don't think you're poorly positioned. By the way, 38 is not old. I'm 47. So I kind of envy you at 38. I would give a lot to have those 9 years back, and hopefully I would use them even more wisely. But you still got a ways to go. As long as you have your health, which is the most important thing in this world, as long as you have your health, you can still work on all the rest. So I wouldn't stress about it. And especially in crypto, fortunes get made in short time frames, 2, 3, 4, 5 years if you're in the right place. Don't stress over it. It's more important to find the right thing to do and to take advantage of the assets you already have. And just by the nature of the space that you have already decided to operate in, I feel like you're probably 60% of the way there. And you might just be going through the darkest before the dawn kind of situation. So that's my high level assessment on it.
Thank you so much. That answers my question. That gives me a lot to think about. And, I have been very fascinated and very much interested in crypto and looking into ways of how I can leverage my team. But, the teams over here, though they're cheap, they're not as creative, or like I feel like I might have to study a little bit more about this space. But yeah, it is something that I'm very much interested in, and I find myself getting distracted with reading about it. So yeah, thank you so much. That helps a lot.
Absolutely. All right, we'll go find the next one. All right, we got Rushil.
Hello, good evening.
How are you?
Pretty good. I had a question about Web3, mainly about where we're currently in the awkward stage of Web 2.5, where we're trying to onboard and transition into the Web 3 atmosphere. I was just kind of thinking to get your thoughts on where you see the space heading.
Yeah, would you mind muting just so we don't get that feedback issue we always seem to get? Thank you. Web3 is kind of a catch-all term for things having to do with decentralization and tokens and crypto and NFTs and so on. And I don't think anybody really knows what they mean, although Packy McCormick and Chris Dixon threw up a pretty good definition where I'm paraphrasing now, but it's something like Web3 is where it's owned by the user and controlled by tokens. Or as I used to say in my old speak when I used to talk about blockchains replacing networks with markets, that these are systems and protocols and companies that are actually run by markets underneath. So it's not a true democracy where every user is equal, but user influence is weighted based on how much value they've contributed to the network. And they could have contributed that value either by putting in money, which is tokens, or by putting in time or code or security, like mining for Bitcoin and so on. So Web3 is sort of this decentralized, user-owned, token-voted, token-controlled web. And I don't think it's necessarily going to replace everything in Web 2 wholesale. Like, is it going to just replace Twitter and Uber and Amazon and Facebook? That's too simplistic of an extrapolation. That's just not how the internet tends to work. Those old things tend to stay the old way, but then new things come along that are completely different, that are unimaginable, that can only be enabled by the new paradigm, and then eventually they completely obsolete the thing that came before. We don't even think about using it. For example, eBay was like a Web 1.0 product. So is Craigslist. eBay and Craigslist haven't been replaced at all. They still do the things that eBay did, and Craigslist still does the things that Craigslist did. But Airbnb came along. There was one tiny little category in eBay that is now just a whole different app that was enabled by mobile. Or Uber came along and just replaced taxis completely. Or Facebook came along and social networking was unimaginable. It replaced bulletin boards, but bulletin boards still continue to exist. It's just Facebook took over all the mind share. So I think that Web3, the same way, is going to create its own brand new apps that are not going to directly substitute for the Web 2.0 apps, but they will be so different because once we break down this idea that, economy and markets and money and games and ownership and and social networks are silos that are supposed to operate separately from each other. Once they sort of start munging together into one thing, we're just going to enable a whole new class of applications that are just unimaginable today. And those will take our mind share and our time and our money to such a level that the old apps will still continue to exist, but they're just going to be much smaller in scope and they're just going to capture much less of our attention. So I can't necessarily predict what those applications are going to be, although you can see, Web3 started out in finance because when you decentralize, if you can decentralize money, you can decentralize anything because money is the hardest thing to protect. So if you can say, I can have a distributed group of anonymous users allocate money, and govern money, then they can actually govern anything. And so we started with money, and you can already see for users who have been using decentralized finance, aka DeFi, on top of crypto, all their mind share is there. Like they're not going to go back to playing with their bank or on Wall Street or trading stocks or even GameStop or what are the Wall Street bets seems amateurish to them because they're just in a much more advanced financial marketplace. So I think we've already seen it happen in DeFi for a certain class of users. And I think we may see it with something like whatever NFTs are headed towards and whatever the online crypto games are headed towards. But it's very, very hard to figure out exactly what that extrapolation will be. So when we say Web3, it's a little glib. It implies that it's a direct successor to Web2. But I don't think it so much replaces Web2 apps with Web3 apps, but I think it just creates a whole new set of apps that then end up taking all of our time and energy and resources. I'm not sure if that answers your question at all, but I was just kind of reacting to the terminology of Web3 to 2.5 to 2.0.
Oh, yeah, definitely did. It gave me a lot to think about. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Man, everyone's so polite. When are we getting some trolls?
I think that comes in the second half hour.
Okay. Let's see. We got... Gonna just pop up the next person who's got a bio. Sorry, I'm skipping people who don't have a bio. No offense. Just to know who you are.
Hello, guys. Hi from Russia. I'm a huge fan of yours. And my question is, here is very cheap workforce. So it's about wealth creation. So several years ago, I started to work as self-employed, found several sources of income. So I started to earn more than average person in Russia. Now I'm trying to automate it, at least get some employees to switch to more skillful work. I'm trying to be a developer, but right now I'm mostly on helping other people, let's say it help desk. And my question is, there are not so many skillful person, but there is some, and they're you should pay them a lot. And I think this works for United States too. Like if you want to hire a developer, it costs at least $40,000 a year, and it's much more than my earnings and what my clients pay me. So how to act in this situation? And to clarify some things, to start something more skillful is harder because the workforce, skillless workforce, is so cheap that it's better to hire like 100 cleaners than to get one tractor to clean the streets, for example. So how to act in this environment?
Let me make sure I understand your question. Are you basically saying that you want to expand, but it's hard to hire skillful people because they're so expensive? Is that the question?
Yes. I mean, I don't have a lot of money to hire skillful, and there are a lot of skillless workforce, and how to act in this situation. I mean,
so this is a very deep topic that's worth exploring for a moment, but it's probably the single biggest driver of economics in our society today. I'm going to mute you for a second if you don't mind, or I'm going to move you to the audience
sure.
so we don't have feedback. Thank you. So there's a very important thing going on today, which is that most of wealth creation, most of earning is becoming digital. If you look at the top companies in the stock market today, they're all tech companies. And if you look at the tech companies, almost all of them are selling purely digital products, with maybe the exception of Amazon. And even Amazon, a lot of their market cap and a lot of their market power comes from things like AWS and from controlling the user wallet, which are actually digital elements. So money is now being made by ideas, and ideas have tremendous leverage. So the people who are creative and have good ideas and can implement and execute them online, they know how to sell them and market them and how to code them, just have absurd earning power compared to people still operating in the physical domain. So we're going through a transition that is just as big as a transition to literacy in society, or the transition to numeracy, and probably even larger, where a small percentage of people who are intelligent and know how to project themselves to the internet can command large amounts of money and power and influence. And this is an example of it. There's one of me up here talking to 1,000 of you. Am I smarter than the average person? Yeah, maybe by a little bit. Am I 100 times smarter than the average person? I don't even know how to measure that, but the answer is no. Like, my IQ is not like 100x. So there's something here going on where even small advantages in the digital domain give you all the leverage and the power. As an example, if I pick the right thing to work on as opposed to the wrong thing to work on, if I pick the right software to build or the right idea to put out there, then that's almost infinitely more valuable than the wrong idea. So you have to throw the idea of hard work out the window. It's right work that matters. It's truth seeking that matters, tying into what James and I talk about a lot, which is like, if you're finding the correct answer, the true answer, then you're just going to get paid a lot more. So now let's get back to the original questioner's question, Sergey's question, which is, you have a small set of people out there who can do a lot. And let's take software engineers for by name. Software engineer as a term gets thrown around. Developer gets thrown around as a term, but it's as broad of a field as, say, painter. You know, there's a painter who'll come and paint your house, and there's another painter who'll paint a Picasso. And which one's more valuable? Well, the Picasso painter is far, far, far more valuable in the right context. And so the same way when we say developer, there's a developer who'll come in and just write like basic code according to instructions of what you told that person. And there's another developer who was the Einstein of developers, who was like a John Carmack who built ID software in Doom and Quake and Oculus, or is like what was the guy, Noct, who built Minecraft, or it's like the Guido van Rossum who wrote Python, or it's just one of these super developers, or Satoshi Nakamoto or Vitalik Buterin who created Bitcoin and Ethereum. So these people are incredibly more valuable, and there's not even 10x engineers. And I know in our current equity-based society, it's hard to talk about 10x engineers, but these people are 100x or 1000x or 10,000x or a million x engineers, where they can just create huge amounts of value. So the best people out there are actually extremely creative and extremely powerful, and they have the ability to create things that are just hundreds of thousands of times or millions of times more valuable than the average person. And some of it is luck for sure, but a lot of it is just having honed their craft over a long period of time, being obsessive about what they do, and also being naturals at it. And so to recruit a person like this can have a huge nonlinear effect on your business. And it almost doesn't matter what your business is as long as it has a software component. So recruiting these people is not something about how much you pay them. Although, sure, yeah, okay, if you pay a little bit more, you have a slightly higher chance. But it's really about getting them to partner with you in the first place. And so there's this old trope that goes around like, oh, I only want to hire people to work for me who are better than me. Well, if they're better than you, why would they work for you? Why don't they just work for themselves, especially in this digital domain where it's so easy to create and spread your ideas? And the answer to that is they'd work for you either because they're too young and they just need their seed corn, or they don't know any better, which would be weird. They're very intelligent in one domain, but they're like completely stupid in another. Or they're really down in their luck, which happens, but it's rare. But more likely they'll partner with you, or maybe you should be one of them in the first place if you want to attract those kinds of people and be able to work with them. So partnership may be a better model. I mean, what you may need to do in this specific case is you may need to find a developer partner who is really good, and maybe you split equity in the business with them and you start an enterprise together. And then that person, a single developer can change the course of a company if they create the right thing. So maybe that person will create the right thing, or at the very least, they'll know how to recruit the right people. Now, in terms of recruiting the right people, you're going to have to look for arbitrages. They might be really young. They might not speak English. They might be in parts of the world where it's hard for them to even get their hands on a computer, let alone do amazing work in code. But finding these talented software developers is the number one problem for any company today. I believe that there will always be a shortage of software developers. There's a lot of people who think that coding will be automated. These people have never written serious code. There's no automaton that will create the next Bitcoin. There's no automaton that will create the next Quake. There is no automaton that will create the next Minecraft. It just does not exist. Those are creative efforts. Creativity cannot be programmed. We do not know how to program creativity. So finding creative individuals who are highly leveraged is not just a problem, it is the problem for any major business, because these people can build entire businesses. So it's sort of like someone saying, hey, I want to write a great novel. I have a great idea for a great novel. Do you know anyone who could write it for me? Or, saying, hey, I want to, launch a new company. I have a great idea for a new company. Do you know anyone who wants to build that company for me? No, that's impossible. Your best chance is partnering with those people. Or in a rare case, you can arbitrage something and find them when they're very young or down in their luck. The other thing is you just hire 10 or 20 really young people, really smart people who can execute on code and ideas, and you just see which one overperforms and you see which one is super creative. And maybe 9 out of 10 are sort of just plodding along and doing their basic work, and 1 out of the 10 turns out to be brilliant. And that's the person you reward big time, because when you figure it out, it's not a long period of time until they figure it out. When they figure it out, they're going to leave and they're going to start their own company or create their own effort. So you need to reward them in some very meaningful way, probably by making them a partner in the business before they leave. So this is the challenge. I don't have a glib solution for you, but you've identified the right challenge, because if you can crack that challenge with your own little hack in your own little part of the world, then you can do great things. All right, let's see who's coming up next. Hey, Amir.
Hey, Naval, how you doing?
Good.
Speaking of cryptocurrencies, what do you think about Bitcoin and future of cryptocurrencies?
That's a super broad question. I mean, obviously, I think cryptocurrencies are sort of the greatest invention of the web since probably the mobile era. And when we look back on the internet, 100 years from now, historians are writing about it. I'm not sure they'll be able to write about the internet as inseparable from cryptocurrencies. I do think they're very fundamental. I refer you to my 2017 tweet storm that said that what did it say? It said Bitcoin will no blockchains will replace networks with markets, and that's where I kind of lay out how fundamental they are. As for Bitcoin itself, Bitcoin is the OG. It's the ultimate store of value. I don't want to take anything away from it. It'll trigger all the maxis, of course, but the value in a cryptocurrency derives from its decentralization. The more decentralized it is, the more value it has, and in that sense, Bitcoin is the most decentralized. It is the most resilient to attacks by big actors, by nation states. You can think of Bitcoin as having a $1.5 trillion bounty on it. Like if someone can crack it, that's the maximum potential bounty for breaking Bitcoin. Reality is probably about a few $100 billion, but that's still a very big bounty. So I do think it's very resilient. I think it's very powerful. It's quite a huge meme. That said, I do think that there are other things that have value. Like Ethereum is creating a global programmable computer for smart contracts and decentralized finance, which is really interesting. The whole NFT craze is really interesting because it's basically saying, hey, there are millions of objects that we might use to store value instead of just one. And that's kind of its own form of decentralization. That said, the whole crypto space is full of scams, and it's basically what unregulated venture capital looks like. If you ever want to know what unregulated venture capital looks like, that's crypto for you. It's a 24/7, 365 global casino where everybody can participate, and so it ends up with all kinds of fraud. And I'm not in the business of telling people what's real and what's not because I get it wrong too. There's all kinds of cryptocurrencies that I bet on where I lost a lot of money. There's all kinds of stuff that I sold way too early. I've embarrassingly not done as well as I should have in crypto, given everything I've talked about in the past. But it's a very difficult space to play in. So I don't second guess people and I don't say what's going to work and what's not. That's up to you to do your homework. But I would say, look for very smart, high quality, ethical, technological teams with good pedigrees that are not like, hogging all of the Genesis block for themselves, are trying to spread it somewhat fairly, have built like novel, new technological breakthroughs or made good trade-offs in the parameters of setting the protocol, aren't just memeing and spamming you on Twitter. Basically, if someone's pushing you to buy it, it's probably a bad sign. They should be doing something interesting. Like Bitcoin already does store a value really well, and is the digital gold of our generation. Ethereum kind of already does the programmable thing pretty well, although it definitely has scalability issues. So you kind of have to make sure that what you're buying into is not just a meme because someone posted a picture of a dog and is spamming everyone on Twitter with it, but that it actually has resilience and value in a real context. But I don't know what's going to work and what's not. So just like everybody else, I'm sort of blindly feeling my way through the dark and investing in a bunch of things and trying to figure out what's going to work and what's not. Um, but I do think that crypto is the most interesting thing going on in tech today. It is the kind of the frontier. That said, the cops are here. The regulators are showing up, and we may have a showdown with the so-called final boss sooner than we had expected. So I think it's a very high risk, high reward situation. Crypto, along with other asset classes, also just got accelerated because of the huge amount of money printing that the Western governments, and particularly the U.S., have gone through. And the U.S. printed, I think, something like 40% of all dollars in circulation were printed in the last year, and that's going to have a huge inflationary effect. It already has. You can see asset prices floating up. Real estate has gone crazy. Stocks have gone way above where they probably would have been otherwise, given the COVID supply shock. And crypto has obviously done extremely well, but a lot of that is just flight from the dollar. That's just the dollar doing poorly more than anything else. So we've got kind of this tailwind behind crypto. That said, the government's not going to take it lying down. They don't want you to run off. When they print money, they don't want you to have a safe haven from the money because it sort of defeats the purpose of their printing the money. So I think we're going to see an empire strikes back kind of situation.
Do
All right.
do you have any plan to make any project on blockchain? I mean, Steve Wozniak just made WozX, or Samsung, the big companies, EA. They doing research on gaming and blockchain. That's kind of a great idea. What do you think?
I don't. I don't have any original technical insight to add into blockchains. I'm not that deeply technical, and I think a lot of people are doing these things as just like marketing hype. Like if they have a significant real new technical contribution to make, then by all means make it. But that's not what 99% of crypto projects do, and none of the ones you mentioned seem like they do that. And I certainly don't have any brilliant ideas on how to do that. So I feel like it would just be stealing from people. All right, I'm gonna move you back. Next one up. Thank you. Let's see who's up. Hey, Arson.
Hi, Naval. Thank you for bringing me up. So, my question to you is uh, see, there is a difference, as you told, in wealth and richness. So, wealth is mostly hidden, right? People cannot see people's wealth because it is hidden somewhere. You can see only richness, the people who spend on expensive things. So, how do we learn if we cannot see something? How do we learn to build wealth? As you have laid down the timeless principles, but do you have any model how to emulate people, not exactly copy, but how to take inspiration from people who are actually wealthy?
Yeah, it's kind of a generic question. I'll try and get into it. I'm going to put you back in the audience for 1 sec, though, just to make it faster. Okay. So you're talking about wealth and kind of status signaling and sort of money signaling. They are different things, but just because you can't see something doesn't mean that there's something wrong. I mean, you can't see people's character either, but it's a real thing, and it takes time to figure that out. I don't think you should necessarily be trying to emulate other people, and you certainly shouldn't be trying to emulate wealthy people. Wealth doesn't make people better, it just kind of makes them more of who they are. So there's some people who are jerks, and wealth makes them bigger jerks, and some people who are always kindly inclined, and wealth gives them the ability to be kinder. So I actually never looked up to wealthy people, and I never tried to emulate them. It didn't matter to me what somebody else had. In fact, emulating someone is almost a form of envy, or at least it's sort of in that same domain where you're being mimetic, you're copying other people. Even if other people were richer than me, as long as I could obtain the things that I wanted, and what I want is freedom in my life, and the freedom comes from being able to afford the things that I want without having to worry about them, then I would be satisfied with that. So at least to some level, there's always a mimetic portion, but I'm just saying don't fixate on that. Don't try to make it worse than it already is. Humans are already mimetic status-seeking creatures by default, and then we can rise above that through our rationality. I wouldn't double down on it. So don't idolize wealthy people, nor try to figure out how wealthy they are, nor figure out how to try and imitate them. I think rather it boils down to just figuring out, okay, um, how do I become the best version of myself? And in wealth creation, the best version of yourself is one who is you're using your mind, you're using your natural born talents, you are staying on the frontier and the edge, you're following your own curiosity, you're doing things that are come easier to you than they come to other people. You're applying the principles of leverage and accountability and specific knowledge wherever possible. You're trying to do it in a long-term way where you're collaborating with the same people over and over, that you trust and that you like working with, and you're taking a very long-term view so you can compound it, and then at the end of it you're kind of going to get what you deserve. You're going to get what you can express, and I guarantee you that if you stick to these principles and you're patient, you'll get more than you need to spend to sustain the lifestyle that brings you freedom. So what somebody else has and how they got there just isn't relevant. You can't copy them, and there is a lot of this sort of hero worship, wealth worship, another form of pornography where you can just stare at it all day long and you get some titillation out of it and you think you're accomplishing something, but you actually aren't accomplishing anything. You can't copy anyone on their way to greatness in anything. It's really just about flowering in your own best way. And I hate to even use that word. I mean, it shows I've been hanging around these spiritual types too long. But, it's just about self-expression at the end of the day. So I would say don't worry about how wealthy other people are or even how they got there. Just focus on how you yourself can be the most effective. I was always a very impatient individual because I was keenly aware of my goals and how quickly time was going away, how it was slipping away, and I needed to get there while I was still young enough to enjoy my freedom. And so I was always very, very driven, and I had no time to read books about other people getting wealthy. It's very hard to speak in the abstract about wealth creation. There's only a very few concrete principles you can put out there. Now, in this modern day and age, the leverage that's available to any given human is far greater than it's ever been. You can go on Clubhouse, you can talk to thousands of people, you can put out a tweet that can reach millions of people, you can write a piece of code that can be run on millions of machines. You can invest in with crypto and with venture capital and all these other asset classes. You can invest in thousands or tens of thousands of businesses. You have millions of books at your disposal. You have a million podcasts at your disposal. Everything is available to you. Everything is out there, both to consume and to produce. If you're sufficiently driven and impatient, you will figure out how to navigate your way through that ecosystem. And it is very dynamic and very evolving. If I sat you down in a class and taught you details, by the time I finished the last class, the first one would already be obsolete. It's a moving, slippery target. So you kind of have to just get out there, throw yourself in the fray, and just do your best. Don't worry about other people. All right. I've got Shabano.
Yep. Hi, guys. First, Naval, thank you so much for all the content you've put out over the last few years. I hope you know how helpful and motivational it is to hear someone articulate often intuitive ideas so clearly. So I just wanted to say thanks for that. And my question is actually about time management. So my co-founder and I, we have a small creative agency where we do product design work for startups. And on top of that, we're building our own product that helps us speed up certain design work and overall shrink the time it takes to develop product. And so we want to work on our product to figure out if other designers would even want it, but also we need money to live, which is why we do the agency work. But more and more, it feels like there isn't enough time to do both. So my question is, do you think it's better to double down on the agency and scale up when we have free time to work on our tool? Or do you think it's better to raise money before we have any traction or any idea of product market fit or any sense of we're sure this is the thing we want to work on? So that's what I'm kind of struggling with.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. And it's a tough dilemma. I'm sorry, I'm going to put you back in the audience just so we don't have feedback and all that stuff. So it's a classic question of how do I bootstrap on the side with a product while I'm busy trying to make a living? And very, very hard problem. I don't have a glib answer for you. I'll tell you how different people have thought about it at different times. One model is, well, one person works on the agency side and brings in the money, the other person builds a product. Another answer is, well, we do work at the agency side, but everything that we do, the way we do it is first we try to productize the solution and then we present the productized solution to the customer. And maybe we tweak it a little bit at the end to customize it for them. Another answer could be, especially if you're in a winner-take-all tech business where if you don't get out there and do it, then somebody else will and they'll win, then you go and raise money and you just drop the agency side and you compete. But I would only recommend that for a business that can be venture scale. Venture scale means that it's a winner take all. It could be a multi-billion-dollar company if it works, and if you don't, and there's some network effect or economies of scale that mean that if you don't win, first place, then there's no point in playing. So these are all kind of different ways to approach it. I would say that it is very hard to serve two masters. Historically, I did it for brief periods of time, not for long periods of time. Eventually, you are going to have to choose. It's hard to be great at anything if you're split two ways about it. The problem is a lot of the stuff you can do on the agency side is very hard to productize. So no easy solutions for you there. I think, though, overall that there is a class of company, and I don't know if yours falls into this, but there's a class of company where you can find a customer, a paying customer for your product very, very early. And you don't necessarily even need to have the product. You can just say that you can find a customer who's desperate enough and they're willing to pay you to basically develop the first version of the product for them. That may be the way out of your current trap. I don't know exactly enough about your product to say if it applies, but if I were you, I would look for something like that, where is there some customer out there that wants what you could be building for them so badly that they will give you enough money that you can survive for 3 or 6 months, that you can now just focus on building the product and customizing it for them. That does work under certain situations, and it would be nice if that you were in one of those situations. All right, I think we have Kyle. Maybe. Kyle left. No, Kyle's here. Hey, Kyle.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good.
Good. So my question is about sales as opposed to business development. So, like I've found a mentor a couple of years ago told me about his experience in the restaurant marketing world, where basically he was consulting with small to medium-sized franchises, and he ended up partnering with Gordon Food Services, who serviced a bunch of these types of companies, offered them consulting services, but also offered them a percentage of any work that they could basically get for him. And as a young HR consultant who loves recruitment and loves coaching, I've been looking to develop my clientele by doubling down on this kind of like affiliate marketing, if that's the right term for it. But I was wondering about your thoughts on that approach as opposed to conventional sales, where you're like constantly trying to earn the right to speak to them and assuming you know what's going on with their company without being under the hood and all that.
Yeah, so I just want to understand the specific question. Would you mind rephrasing it for me just as clean, straight up one line question so I don't miss it?
Yeah. I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are on like affiliate marketing or sharing clients as opposed to pursuing new ones, like the idea that like your client base is already out there, they're already somebody else's tribe, and like more working through companies and relationships as opposed to trying to develop new ones and do the conventional sales model.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm going to put you back in the audience for a sec. So there's an old joke in Silicon Valley that would go something like, business development is just sales without a quota. And at least in the early 1990s, it was rare to find someone in the business development role. It was usually just a failed founder who, they were a founder of a company, they were a junior founder, it wasn't going well, so you stick them in a biz dev role. And an old school company would tell you that there's really only two jobs. There's building the product and there's selling it. And sales is about finding new prospects. And yeah, you can dig into the existing prospects that you have, and you can dig in deeper. And that used to be called account management. Maybe there's some business development there. But look, at the end of the day, if you want to be successful, if you want to be the top of your craft, if you want to be among the best at what you do, then it is best to stick to the basics and nail them really well. And the basics are building a product and selling it. And when you sell something, it doesn't matter whether you're selling it to an existing client or whether you're selling it to a new client. It's just you're taking responsibility for selling this product and making it as successful as possible and making it as widely distributed as possible. And the exact nature, whether it's sales or business development or community marketing, might change a lot. You might have the kind of company where you already have a lot of accounts and it's all about digging into those accounts, and then sure, you can call it biz dev if you want. Or there's another one where you might have to go and get a lot of new accounts, and that's sales. Or you have to do it all online, in which case it's all marketing. Or you may have to do it all in a social format, in which case is community development. So there are many different ways in which you may be called upon to sell a product, but I would take it one level higher and just say, be the kind of person that takes responsibility for distributing the product, whether it's through marketing hacks, whether it's through sales, whether it's through business development, whether it's through community. Just take responsibility for getting the product out there. Just the same way that if you're a builder, yeah, you could say I'm a designer, or you could say I'm a developer, or I'm a product manager, whatever, but who cares? Just take responsibility for making sure the product gets built, whatever the heck it takes, and making sure it's the best in class product. And even though we mythologize sales and marketing, community development, I actually still believe that, especially in the technology business, most of the power, or maybe not most, but at least a big chunk of the power comes from building. if you've built the right thing, it sort of sells itself. The cost of sales, in fact, is almost a indicator. The higher the cost of sales, it's an indicator of a bad product, or at least a product, maybe it might be good, but it doesn't fit the market quite right. The better the product, the more it fits the market, the more the market will just beat a path to your door and they will take the product from you. Patrick Collison, the founder of Stripe, I remember he told me one day, he said, I finally now understand what product market fit is. And I was like, okay, what's product market fit? And he said, it's when you can't stop the company from growing. Like you can't stop from selling the product. The product is just selling itself. It's just flying off the shelves and going out the window, and the company's just growing at a certain rate no matter what you do or don't do. And so that was to him the definition of product market fit. And once you find it, sales, biz dev, marketing, and even community development, all of these take a backseat. So I would say if you're going to be in sales or on the distribution side, then just take responsibility for distribution regardless of channel. But make sure you're working with a really good team that's built the right product in the first place, because even the best salespeople can't sell bad products for that long. Eventually, the quality of the product catches up with you. All right, let's see who else is out there. All right, I'm calling up Paul. Hey, Paul.
Hello. So I raised my hand kind of a bit ago. I don't know if you guys remember this, but earlier in the conversation, James, you mentioned you're speaking about how enlightenment, has different definitions for different people, and how you find that you have the ability to be, and let me know if I'm misquoting you, but to be mindless, or to at least kind of tap into that sort of world, but you don't necessarily flex it. And that kind of surprised me. I would think that if you have that ability, I find that most of my thoughts are just kind of dribbled, or, cruel, or in some way misleading. If I had that ability, I would think I would flex it all the time. Yeah, I don't know if you remember the context of when you said that, but do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I remember that. So part of the key is to understand that I'm at a point now where my thoughts are very peaceful. So there's literally zero internal conflict. So if I'm thinking about something or I'm not thinking about something, I'm perfectly content. And so I don't really care that much, to be quite honest, whether my mind is empty or it's not. There are times where I feel like not thinking about anything, so I'll sit down and do nothing for a few moments. And it's like a nice break. But I also find the world interesting. I enjoy like being a part of the world and participating. And a byproduct of that is that your mind runs. Because you're constantly thinking about, am I going to do this or am I going to do that, or what's the best way to do this thing that I'm trying to do? There are all these applications of thought that are very useful. So that's part of where I spend my time is thinking about things. So I kind of flex between thinking and not thinking as I feel like it.
Thank you.
It's a really hard topic to talk about. I mean, my mind is a mess. It's kind of crazy, and I have all kinds of crazy opinions and ideas and thoughts and conflicts, and most of them I don't need. Like I've realized, like most of my opinions are worthless. That's probably true for all of us. Like we don't need to have opinions on everything. I was going for a run the other day, and I hate running, so I was like huffing and puffing and kind of miserable. And every person I ran past, for some reason, my mind had an opinion on them. And it was just worthless. It was a completely worthless opinion. And at some point, I just kind of saw through it, and I was like, okay, I don't need to have an opinion on everybody. And then I just sort of kept running. It was peaceful for a while, and then it went back to filing opinions. And then at some point, I just gave up on the mind. I was like, fine, you have your opinions, but at some level, I'm not going to let them bother me. I'm not going to let them affect me. So I think that the mind is just going to do its thing. And at least for me, what helps is to just kind of have a certain level of understanding that there's never any peace. Like there's never a place to rest your head. There's never a place to slow down or stop. And if the mind's always going to be in turmoil, it's always going to be in turmoil, and that's fine. That's just kind of the way it is. But you don't need to stress about its turmoil, and that requires a certain level of detachment. But that detachment will naturally come just from having a self-interest in your mind. You made some comment, Paul, about how you don't love the quality of your thoughts, and I think that's actually kind of helpful. If you're objective with how you're behaving internally, then you stop taking as much of an interest in what you're doing, what you're thinking. And then you're still having the thoughts, but you're not as attached to them. And in a weird way, it's sort of easier to kind of let go of them. And maybe then you end up like with James, where there just aren't as many thoughts. But I would say that my mind has a lot of thoughts, it's very busy, but at the same time, I don't let it destroy my peace or happiness or just general demeanor.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, I think I don't know. I almost want to say like it just takes time to sort of let these words seep in, but that almost just sounds like yet another like
Yeah, look, it's unique to each individual. Like
yeah.
everyone's conditioned a different way. You can't all get unconditioned the same way. So taking an interest in yourself is enough, and then it just takes time, as you're saying. Um, I actually recommend the reason James is kind of up here is kind of funny. So James followed me on Twitter for a while. We had some back and forth, and then I sort of started looking up to him as sort of this really wise person. And I was like, wow, this guy's really smart and really interesting. He makes really good comments. And then I went in his blog and I read the whole blog, and I was like, wow, I could learn from this guy. So I contacted him and asked him if he wanted to meet up. And then I met up with James, and I asked him, "So, how did you get into kind of this truth-seeking business?" And James said, "Oh, I was following you. I was reading your stuff." And that made me feel really bad, because here's someone who got into this because he was following me, but now he's way ahead of me and now he's teaching me. So somewhere along the way I screwed up. But then I just kind of came to terms with it. Like, okay, look, everybody figures it out in their own schedule. Everybody has their own path. Obviously, we're all different individuals with different strengths and weaknesses. So just kind of, play the hand you're dealt and play it fine. As long as I don't stress about it, as long as it doesn't bother me, then I don't care if my mind's busy or not. In fact, I have a good fast mind, like other people have good fast bodies. So in some level, I enjoy flexing it. I enjoy using it, and it's a superpower. By the way, Charlie Knowles just joined. I'm going to embarrass Charlie because Charlie has probably my all-time favorite tweet. I'll circle back to what that tweet is later.
Appreciate the thoughts. You guys have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
All right, let's see who's next. Okay, we pulled up Nursimar, who has a good bio. Let's see if Nursimar gets up here. Did he make it? No. Oh, there he is. Hey.
Hello, Naval. How are you?
Good. Nice impromptu bio.
Okay, so my question was, what's your take on blockchain security? Like, I have been into network security, and earlier in the days, we used to crack passwords via brute force attack. So I always had that thought of paranoid kind of thing, that is it possible to crack a private key through a brute force attack? Not now, we don't have that resources, those computers, those really good computers where it is able to crack those. But in future, what's your take on that?
All right, I'm going to move you to the audience. Thank you for the question. So I'm not a technical expert on this, but my understanding is that no, it's not going to be really that possible to crack blockchain security. First of all, anything that breaks public key encryption will break all encryption on the internet. It will break all banking transactions, all security, all logins, all codes, all ownership, including things like DNS. So if you break public key encryption through some future innovation, it pretty much breaks the entire internet. It breaks HTTPS, and HTTPS now is the foundation of the internet, not HTTP. So if it happens, it's kind of a catastrophic disaster across the board. That said, I don't think it's likely to happen. The only real candidate on the horizon, short of some incredible mathematical breakthrough that we cannot even predict, would be quantum computing. And quantum computing would break kind of some conventional encryption algorithms, but you can create quantum hard, quantum resistant encryption algorithms that I think would get rolled out in time. So, of all the things I worry about with blockchains, that just isn't one of them. I feel like that's um, not a real thing that you should stay up at night worried about if you're investing in crypto or if you're working on blockchains. All right, just invite up Bramsis. Bram.
Hello. How's it going?
Okay.
Huge fan of your tweets. Thank you for your work. One thing in your podcast, How to Get Rich, that always I've struggled with was the idea of productizing yourself. You explained it really clearly, but I think that I'm more interested in productizing my work in a more pseudonymous format as an artist. So I would love some advice on how to productize yourself if you're not interested in capturing your own identity.
Well, we're sort of living in the golden age of pseudonymity, right? A lot of the NFT collectors online are just identified by their crypto punk, like there's 6529, who's probably one of the best Twitter authors today, and it's just this anonymous crypto punk who's talking about NFTs. I think Vincent Van Doe, who's an anonymous NFT collector, is now literally running a fund. So that you have anonymous people who are raising funds to invest. The DAOs are run by anonymous people. So, if anything, sort of the crypto revolution and the internet allows for the emergence of pseudonymity. Of course, it goes way back further, right? There's nom de plumes and author writing under assumed names and so on. So I think you're in a better place to do that than has ever been true historically. Now, the downside, of course, is that you have to start establishing a reputation from scratch. But because most people have no reputation to begin with, it's not that much of a barrier. Maybe it's a little restrictive in that you can't jump on Clubhouse or do YouTube as easily, but you also end up relatively insulated to cancel culture. So I don't view it as a barrier. Honestly, if I could wave a magic wand and go back in time and start over, I might choose to do an anonymous Twitter account rather than have it tied to my name. That said, I like talking. Twitter is actually not my best medium in a sense, because now I see all these imitative accounts that tweet like me, and some of their tweets, I look at them like, that's pretty good. This person's figured the formula out. And so it makes me reluctant to tweet some things these days because I'm like, well, that's kind of obvious, or that's something that any one of the various imitator accounts could have tweeted. But I know that when I'm speaking in a Clubhouse format, that it's, there I have a more of an advantage because most people are not very good extemporaneous speakers. So the medium, for me, disfavors anonymity. But you may just have to find a medium to express yourself through that favors anonymity or pseudonymity. Twitter is one of those media. NFTs are another one. Coding is absolutely one of those, as Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that is, demonstrated. So I don't view it as a hindrance. And in fact, I think in this age of the sovereign individual, where you want to stay out of the reach of mobs and governments, pseudonymity can be a huge asset. If you start developing that gene, if you start flexing that muscle, then I think it'll serve you well over time. So I don't really view it as a disadvantage. I would say it's a disadvantage at the very, very beginning, but it actually becomes an advantage later in the cycle.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. God, everyone's so well behaved. It's funny because I've been in other people's Q&A sessions, and there's always a troll in there somewhere.
Maybe it's just because it's a Sunday night, no one's drunk.
Speak for yourself. I may have invited someone up who's going to shill their podcast. No shilling, please. Hey, Anish.
Hey Naval, thank you for the opportunity. In fact, I've heard your content just a few months ago when somebody recommended your podcast to me, but it did enlighten me completely, like to an entire altogether. My question is, Nawal. Now, interestingly, I went back to my grandparents' hometown and I had a huge awakening that there was a huge ecosystem of people who were still a decade back in time. Literally, like almost, there was nothing new, even in there was no new business, there was nothing that just came in or created disruption there. So, in a space like this, imagine I'm going to introduce a food item or a product that they are not even used to. How do you think we should build that culture of them developing it as an everyday consumable? When this thing has happened 10 years ago, it hasn't happened ever since. How do you think we can reinvent this entire thing?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. You're gonna have to rephrase that for me.
Okay.
Unless James, you understood it.
Right. Okay. Let me put it simpler. Imagine I have to start a business where I'm trying to introduce a very naive and conservative crowd to something that is consumed very commonly across the world, something like a doner kebab or a hamburger. How do you bring in that cultural change into a small group of people to adopt a new practice or a new business, or to pick up something new that is not even used to their everyday living in general?
All right, I'm gonna move you to the audience. Thanks for the question. I think I understand the question. Uh, I don't think that's how you actually spread products. I think the way products spread is you build something and there's someone in the potential customer base who just really can't live without it, so they adopt it and then they tell their friends. I don't think you change the customer or you convince the customer. I think you find your customer. And sometimes, everyone can be your customer. You create an iPhone, everybody wants it. Or sometimes it's a point solution where you build it and one person out of 100 raises their hands and says, I've been waiting for this forever. I can't believe you did it. But this idea that you're changing the audience or changing the customer, bringing them along, I just don't think that's real. There were a lot of companies in the early days of the web that were built for bringing along people who were not yet ready to adopt their product, and they kind of universally failed. As an example, there was one called Web TV, and the idea was that old people, aren't going to use a computer. The screens are too small, and so we have to put the web on their TV because they're just watching TV all day. And so let's put the web on their TV. And it was a spectacular failure. Spent a lot of money, built some cool product, but nobody used it because it turns out that it was easier just to let those older people sort of just live their current lives and instead focus on the new kids who are coming up. And so, just serve the early adopters. And that's generally been true on the web. Even with AngelList, when we started building products for VCs, we had to create our own general partners. We had to create our own investors and limited partners. We didn't go back to the older ones and try and convince them to adopt our products. So I would get out of this mindset of you're going to change the customer and convince them to adopt a product. I think rather it's on you to create a product the customers out there or that the potential users out there already want. Oh, we have a celebrity up here. Paul Davison is here. Woohoo. We get a real celebrity in the house. Hey, Paul.
What's up? How you doing? Good to see you.
How's it going? Yeah, it's been a while.
I know.
6 million followers. You cheated somehow.
I was probably on the initial recommended user list.
Yeah, I think you were on this app early is what happened.
I was an early user. That's right.
Can you give us a state of the Clubhouse? I've been gone for a while.
What's that?
Give us a state of the Clubhouse.
Man.
I've been gone for a while.
Oh yeah, so we been launching a bunch of stuff the last couple of days. So we've the last however many months has just been like building out the basic stuff. We were like 8 people at the beginning of the year and we're like 80 now. And we launched on Android, we got to general release, we launched DMs. In the past couple of weeks we launched universal search and clips, and we're launching replays, so like native recording in the app, and that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. And so it's kind of a big evolution of the product, and so there's we're localizing the app, like we're doing a bunch of stuff. So we're kind of now at the point where we can just get back to shipping really fast because we kind of have a bunch of the discovery and infrastructure built out, but it's been a heck of a year.
Yeah, it's still I mean, it's a very easy to use, very simple product despite the large number of features in here. One thing I've always been, okay, I'll tell you a funny thing about Clubhouse. When I first started using Clubhouse, which was pretty early on, I remember I looked at the UI and I was like, wow, this is like this really homegrown, scribbled, hacked together, UI. It's obvious that there's no professional UI designer here, but I'm sure they'll fix that later. They're just experimenting. And then here we are, like a year and a half later, it's still the same UI, but now I've actually grown to like it a lot. I'm like, this is actually a really good UI, and it feels like the right UI. But it's not like the UI for any other app. I can't point to any other app that I know in the entire iOS App Store that has a similar UI that at least predates Clubhouse. So who dreamt up this crazy UI? Where did this come from?
So I was our first designer. So basically in the really early days, Rohan was doing all of the engineering, and I was doing all the pixels, and then we collaborated a bunch on product. And then our the first designer, like real designer who joined, was Aaron Satig, who he's really good. He was the first designer at Facebook, and he like invented photo tagging and all sorts of other crazy stuff. And he was the first designer to join our team kind of last fall. So he's been driving that. And we have a couple more designers who are really great who joined over the last few months. But you can blame me for the original.
Yeah, I mean, it still looks like the original UI, so I don't know what the hell Aaron and the others have been doing. You can reduce your team from 80 to 70 right there. Save yourself some time.
It's so painful. Like there's so many things that we want to polish that are like, pixel level things that we want to polish and visual redesigns we want to do and all of that. But we've always just tried to ruthlessly prioritize and like have this philosophy that we have to earn the right to do that. And I just think the core product features matter so much more. So it's been like us trying to focus on that.
I will say that this little paper airplane is floating on the bottom right of my screen. Is
Yeah.
that a DM? Is that what that is?
Yeah. So you can just swipe right till after you can tap on that.
Yeah, see, that just shouldn't be there. It's just like, it's so in my face. It wants me to touch it. I feel like something violent and kinetic is going to happen when I press it. I'm in the middle of giving a big talk. It just feels completely inappropriate there.
So here's the thing that's a little bit different about DMs here is that people use them while they're in a room. So if you pull it over, if you swipe over from the side, you see it. It's like 2/3. It goes 2/3 of the way up of the screen, and you can have conversations while you're in the room. And so it's a little bit different than most other platforms where DMing is something that you do separate from creating content. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, so it's truly a back channel. Got it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right, still feels weird. It feels like it feels like I'm going to press that and the paper airplane is going to literally take off and do something horrible while I have 1,000 listeners in here. By the way, we broke 1,000. Woohoo!
Yeah, we're getting too many navigational elements right now, so we're going to need to rethink all that stuff. Probably add a tab bar at some point, but tried to resist so far.
Cool. I'm going to pull up Bram Cohen. Bram Cohen just showed up. Bram's a genius, people. So whenever Bram's around, you got to pull him up. Let's see if he joins. Oh, there he is. He's not shy. Hey, Bram.
Hello.
Bram, creator of BitTorrent. So if any of you have heard of this piece of software that's used for all kinds of downloading, I'm sure none of you have actually ever used it because you're all good people. Bram created BitTorrent, which in my mind was like the first functioning peer-to-peer protocol, for sharing files on the internet. Very impressive piece of software. Now he's building Chia, which is his take on cryptocurrency. And Bram is a master puzzler. Every time I run into him, Bram gives me some puzzle to do, which I can never do, and I feel really stupid afterwards. So thanks, Bram.
Well, it's supposed to take more than a minute to do a puzzle. Like if it's in order to be worth your while to manufacture an actual physical object, it should give someone some hours of entertainment if they're gonna mess with it.
This is fair, but you're talking to a man who can't even solve a Rubik's Cube. Because I don't have patience.
A Rubik's Cube is actually a really hard puzzle.
Really?
Yeah. Among people who do puzzles, there's general agreement that the Rubik's Cube is actually too hard to solve for the general public.
How did it become so popular then?
It's just so fiddly. It's just so physically compelling. It was like independently invented a number of times, and it's just such a canonical thing that appeals to people's desire to fix patterns in a thing and people's like deep understanding of orthogonal movement, because we live in this world of right angles everywhere, but that concept being just ever so slightly subverted.
Is
Yeah,
it not the type?
it makes.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, is it not the type of thing where if you like learn how to do it and you practice it enough, anyone can basically do it? You actually have to be
it's
quite
actually
talented to do it.
it's at a difficulty level that's pretty reasonable for the general public to like look up a solution and follow the instructions. That's a pretty reasonable exercise for most people to do. So that's how most people approach it.
I did a startup called Highlight years ago, and the first engineer we hired was the world record champion in Rubik's Cube regular and blindfolded. And for like during his interview, we're like, show us. And he does it behind his back and in, double-digit seconds, something like that.
This couldn't have been that long ago, because people didn't. It's only relatively recently that people got pretty good at blindfold. But
yeah, he would just look at it, memorize the whole thing, and then just go.
Yeah. Well, there's these hilarious there are like self-reported records on things, and there's actually records for blindfolded 4x4x4 and 5x5x5, and people's comments on those things are hilarious, because at least when I checked them, this was a number of years ago, there weren't that many people who reported having a time for these things at all.
Right.
And so it's like a self-reported time of like 2.5 hours. And it's like literally it's like an hour of memorization and then an hour and a half of solve with a blindfold on. And the comment is the first time I did it, when I took the blindfold off, he's like, I screamed after I took my blindfold off, and it was solved, because the first time I did it, I took the blindfold off and it was still scrambled. I messed up somewhere along the line. So some crazy person like took the time to like practice enough that they felt confident in their ability to like do this memorization, and then do a solve, and then they went and spent an hour like memorizing, and then put a blindfold on and just sat there moving this cube, doing mental like remembering things stuff for another hour and a half, took off the blindfold and saw that it was still scrambled, and then went through this whole process again.
That's amazing, because it's not actually that many moves that I would imagine you need to do. But
well, for the 4x4x4 it is, because that's a much larger object than the 3x3x3. So the like standard size Rubik's cube.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is a pretty reasonable size. But the Rubik's cube, actually, it's pretty good. A lot of what makes it compelling is it's very easy to get one piece in place. Like any one piece, if you want to put it in place, you just kind of put it in place. But that scrambles up everything else when you do it. So it kind of feeds into this very primal thing of, it's very obvious to people what the pattern should be, and it bothers any hint of OCD they might have that it's not there. And so they instinctively just start putting pieces in place, and then it stops working. So it really hooks people in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting with the hour and a half solve. I mean, it's not like you can do trial and error, right? So it's not like you're learning along the way. So I was wondering, do they just use an approach that is easier but takes longer, or if it's
there are write-ups of it. I think there's a fairly standardized approach that people use, where it's like, okay, here's how you analyze the position, and then you like memorize a sequence of numbers based off of that, and there's some way of translating from the current positions of pieces to these numbers, and then you have memorized based on the numbers what things that you do. And I assume you practice it with your eyes open for a while.
yeah.
And things like that. But nowadays the blindfold solves are actually really impressively fast, even in absolute terms. But the non-blindfold solves these days, the fastest average anyone's ever done is I believe it's below 5 seconds now. And that's not like a one time solved. That's like an average over like whatever number of
Oh
times they do it
God.
I
when they
just
do
I
it in
just don't
competition.
understand the point of becoming good at something that a computer can do better.
Well, well, it's a sport, right? Like it's like all sports.
Yeah, I don't understand sports either.
Okay.
I think sports are largely about
Physical
camaraderie.
activity is a different thing, and if there's a camaraderie element, there's a physical activity element. Those make sense. And maybe but yeah, just the idea that, like, for example, that's why I never got into chess. It's like, okay, eventually a computer is going to beat you at it, so what's the point?
What do you think? Do you feel the same way about photorealistic art?
Yes. I've never been interested in
I think
any,
people get
I've never been,
satisfaction.
I've
Sorry,
never
go
been
ahead.
interested in anything that isn't open-ended. Any closed form problem just feels like you're just wasting your time, which might be fine. It's like a fidget spinner, right? You do that because you're enjoying wasting your time.
I got one for you. What about Smash Brothers?
Oh, that's because it's competitive with another human. But yeah, you got me. You got me.
But people are working on
probably
bettering
talking to people, yeah.
themselves, right? Like when you do these activities,
But
you're
bettering
improving
themselves to what end? Like
you're improving your reflexes, you're improving your reasoning ability, you're doing these things.
Is it really reasoning ability? It feels like a very specific form of memorization.
Or,
I
well,
agree that when you're solving original puzzles, then you're exploring like your mental map space and you're increasing that. But if you're just memorizing Rubik's Cube loops and then figuring out how to do them blindfolded, that just seems like the work of an automaton.
So like I'm a juggler. So I'm a 5-ball juggler. And for me, I got into juggling because, well, I was bored in college, and then I eventually dropped out. But I juggled a lot then, and I'm still pretty good at juggling. But my best prop by far was always Devil Stick, and I don't do Devil Stick anymore, and a lot of that is because I just didn't enjoy doing it as much as regular juggling because I'm actually really just doing it as exercise. And trying to get.
It's also meditative, right? Because you're getting out of your own mind. You're focusing on something. If your mind starts wandering, then you're going to drop something.
I
mean,
it's weird.
Are you still thinking about like the horrible things that happen during your day while you're juggling 5 balls, or does it actually take you enough out of your mind?
It's weird. So there's certain kinds of thoughts you can have while you're juggling, and there are other ones you can't. And it's kind of like your mind sort of does wander when you're doing it. I mostly count how many catches I'm doing. But you can have other thoughts that happen, but you can't, like, there can't be any counting happening in them if you're also counting your catches. And also, there's certain kinds of things, like the part of your brain that thinks about how your hands work and how trajectories of objects work. That's like just totally busy. But then the rest of your brain, you actually do it better if that part of the rest of your brain is preoccupied with some other random thing and not like
that's a good point. So there's two kinds of physical focus. There's one which might put you in flow. Let's say you're sailing or you're surfing or snowboarding, where you're completely focused on the physical activity, and so it takes you out of your mind. It can give you some peace. But on the flip side, there are things like you're going for a walk, or you're juggling, you're taking a shower, you're driving a car, where you're doing something physical and a certain part of your brain is occupied, but the other part of your brain suddenly gets very creative and can wander, and you can have your shower thoughts or your walking thoughts.
It's more like walking. That's not a bad analogy. It's a little different because well, two things. First of all, for me at least, 5 balls is on the edge of what I can athletically do. So I'm trying to build up to doing 5 balls for 5 minutes. Mostly because I for a really stupid petty reason that I used to do a lot of 5-ball endurance, but I never timed myself doing it. And the longest I was ever timed for, which is probably not the longest run I ever had, was at a 5-ball endurance competition at a juggling convention. I dropped just shy of 5 minutes. So I would like to get back up to it and be able to do 5 balls for 5 minutes. But these days I usually drop my longer runs. I get around 300 catches, and then I drop just because my arms are just burning, just fire in my forearms from doing it for that long. But there's also this big thing with it where, like, you're not capable consciously of keeping track of as much stuff as you need to for juggling that many objects. It really is like some part of your brain is just completely autonomically doing stuff like faster than you can think. Um, and then a lot of what you're doing consciously is just don't get rattled. You're sort of vaguely getting aware of whenever there are throws that are really off, but a lot of it is stay calm. Don't get don't get stressed, don't get anxiety. Just whatever thing goes off immediately, as quickly as possible, get the pattern back together and just keep going and forget about how it almost fell apart just literally 1 second ago.
It almost seems to me like conscious thinking is overrated. It's how we communicate as humans because we have to articulate to each other and have to give reasons and planning to each other. But for our own maximum creativity and productivity, it seems like conscious thought takes a back seat. For example, when you're juggling, you're saying you can't think consciously. Okay, that's in the physical domain. But even when you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to have a breakthrough, a lot of that comes subconsciously. When you're trying to make a decision, a lot of that comes subconsciously from gut feel. Conscious to me seems is mostly about ex post facto reasoning to explain to somebody why you did something or to come up with some plan that you can then, communicate and implement. But it seems like it's just a very small portion of our planning and
Yeah,
creative
well, and
capabilities.
and the evidence is overwhelming that most of the time when you ask someone like, why did you do blah de blah, uh, their brain just sort of makes something up, and
Right,
they'll
right.
say
There's
that.
experiments where they separate the hemispheres. The person's hemisphere has been cut through surgery to
Yeah.
stop an epileptic seizure, and then they show one side some image and the other side a different image. Then they ask you why you did something, and depending on whether they answer with their left hand or their right hand, they give you different answers.
Yeah,
Um,
but the weird thing is they're not aware that they're making up bullshit when they give answers. They think they're giving like
right, the legit
a
reason.
clear,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah. There's also other things where you can like hit someone with like an electric shock that forcibly like makes them shrug, and you say, "Why did you shrug?" They're like, "I don't know. I just decided to shrug at that moment."
Yeah, I found that at least the way my mind pattern works is that a lot of the times when I am thinking something, I'm actually telling it to somebody else, which is probably what makes me good at Clubhouse and Twitter, is just I'm used to always talking to other people in my head. I'm always explaining it to somebody. And I've tried to get rid of that affectation because I'm like, well, what if I don't want to tell somebody else? It should still be valuable, but then my mind just automatically falls back into that pattern. I wonder if that's just me or if everybody does that.
Oh, people's brains are very different. Like I don't really think in words very much at all.
How
It's
would
kind of
you
hard.
describe how you think?
Yeah, well, I don't know how to describe how I think. There's a lot of and there's all these weird things about it that like I'm really good at mechanical things, like these very three-dimensional things, but my two-dimensional visualization actually kind of sucks. Um, so I think it's more that it's kind of like using hands. I think it's like the the dorsal vision pathway instead of the ventral thing. Um, but um, but it's weird because for me, when I'm thinking in terms of like algorithmic concepts and cryptographic things and things like that, those are just like primitives that I think about that just feel very natural to me. Like,
Yeah, Richard Feynman used to talk about how he did all of his math problems visually. Like he would always imagine like, oh, it's an orange and the orange is on the surface and it's bending, on a table or something. So he would always turn it very visual. And I would say even for myself, like if I don't have a visual feel for something, then I'll just start making it up. I'll start assigning colors and shapes to things, even while I'm putting words around it, and images. It's very
yeah,
hard to think purely verbally.
yeah, my the way I think is much more abstract usually than that, which makes it like, well, it's good and bad for talking about it because um, in some ways it's easier to verbalize abstract concepts, or at least it makes me able to verbalize aspects of things without getting mired down in too much of the details sometimes. But also, often it's kind of like if I'm having trouble, it's kind of like if I couldn't verbalize it, I have trouble doing the reasoning, and it's just it's an unusual thought process that I'm following.
leads to unusual outcomes. And, the modern world, you just have to be right once. So it's
Well,
good to play in nonlinear intellectual domains. You don't have much risk of downside. And if you hit on the upside, you do well.
there's benefit to just having a different brain from everybody else in any direction. It just has to be different from other people. And then you
Yes,
can
as
find a
long as you're
specialty.
living in a society that rewards specialization of labor, which ours
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
But yes, if you had to live in the woods and start a fire by yourself, well, all of us would die, but you probably a
Yeah,
little earlier.
yeah. There's no way you could ever possibly figure out how to start a fire by yourself. That's like, it's not that bad, but it's like days of training to get the hang of it.
Are there well-established techniques for turning on shower thoughts, like those times where you have that insight that you sort of have been waiting to have it come to you?
I have my
So
own that I've hacked, but I don't know if they're well established.
so a lot of my process often is, it's very rare for me to have like a thought where I'm like, oh, I have to go write this down right now, because it's kind of like my thoughts are often very half chewed, and it's kind of like, well, there's this process of like kind of forgetting it and then remembering / reconstructing it and having a better sense of it when I do it that time as well. And I think a lot of my ideas, like, I don't remember the moment when I came up with them, and a fair a fair number of them actually I remember coming up with the thought while I was asleep. It literally came to me in a dream. Uh, Although my dreams are like semi-lucid in a really strange way.
That doesn't surprise me.
And I assume that a lot of the ideas that I have that I just don't remember when I came up with them, I literally just came up with them while I was asleep, but it was like while I was I didn't wake up immediately afterwards, so I just, that the idea remained in my memory, but the process didn't.
Yeah, I don't know about any specific techniques for turning that on. What I can say is that, and most people, this isn't even going to be relevant, but I'll say it just to kind of aid in the understanding. If you can look at a problem without thinking about it, that is very conducive to the kind of shower thought type of insight. Because it goes back to what you guys were saying about conscious thinking earlier. Conscious thinking is basically just your memory acting. So you're not going to come upon anything novel. You're not going to find any fresh insights when you're just consciously thinking about something. It's the kind of passive observation, and then something jumps out at you.
Well, conscious thinking can be good when you're trying to be methodical.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're trying to cover every possibility, when you're trying to work through a whole bunch of pieces of data that you want to make sure that you've covered, being conscious and / conscientious about what you're doing can be very, very helpful there. And that's not a let your mind meander kind of process. But for me, a lot of my process just in general is pace around, stare off into space, kind of like, I don't know, let my brain wander until some kind of patterns click into place in my brain. And it's a matter of like not trying to congeal them too fast as that's all happening.
Well, and kind of the trick that I used to use was to spend some time looking at whatever problem it was that I was trying to solve. And then, if you can't get there analytically, obviously you need the sort of shower thoughts approach. So you basically you spend time looking at the problem, and then you just drop it and do some mindless activity. Like you said, when you're juggling, that's very similar to.
Yeah, I would use a computer science analogy where what I would do is I would just, and it's not deliberate, it's just kind of how my mind works. I just obsess over something over and over and over from every angle, and I can't stop thinking about it. And I think about it for as long as I need to until I'm exhausted and I'm fed up with it. And then, like a day later or 2 days later, like the answer will just come to me. And if I rush the process, if I try to get an answer before my subconscious produces the answer, then it comes out wrong. But if I just let everything kind of sit for a while, then it'll come out correctly. And so I think of it as like I'm loading the problem into my subconscious through my conscious. I'm loading the problem. I'm examining it from every angle. And then once my subconscious has all the data and is convinced that it's an important problem to work on because I've been obsessing over it, then during my sleep or during my normal activity, it'll background process it. And the subconscious is a lot more processing power than the conscious. It's just that it's busy. It doesn't want to think about every little thing. So you really have to inform it and send the urgency to it. And then when it's ready, it kind of produces the answer. And it usually comes out when when you're somehow, I don't know why, but it's shower thoughts or walking thoughts. When you're kind of by yourself, you're physically somewhat occupied, but you're mentally free. And then it'll sort of pop out the answer. And when it comes out, usually for me, it's articulated in a very pithy way. I mean, that's my Twitter personality too, but it'll come out in almost like a tweet worthy one sentence where it's like, no, this is why it's the answer. I'm like, oh yeah. It's like over the last year, for example, I was obsessing over, where to live, because one of the things that COVID has done for many of us is given us our geographic independence. And so I was obsessing, where to live is one of the biggest decisions you ever make, because you're choosing like who your neighbors are, who your friends are, where your kids go to school, all those kinds of things. And I was obsessing over all these different factors. And then it finally popped up to me that actually I should optimize for quality of life at this point, because I'll just live longer and healthier and everything else is irrelevant. And that's what it gave me the answer. But it took quite a bit of obsession, going through taxes and earning power and where's friends and where's family before all that emerged. And please don't give away my location, but you understand the process that I went through.
It can help to just literally sleep on things. That makes a big difference.
That's
Just
literally it. Yes, load your subconscious to sleep on it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure my subconscious processed it while I was sleeping, not while I was necessarily awake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was from Josh Waitzkin. I hope I'm not misattributing this, but one of the things that he said was basically, if you want your subconscious to work on a problem, focus on it for 10 minutes before you go to bed and then just sleep.
Yeah, there have been a number of good ideas that I've had where I literally remember coming up with the idea in a dream, and I woke up and I still remember the idea. Now most of the time when that happens, it's incoherent gibberish, but sometimes it's actually a really good idea.
Well, actually, my famous tweet storm on how to get rich without getting lucky was a late night thing. I woke up at 3 a.m. and wrote it. And it was because I'd been turning it over and over in my head for days and days and days. Obviously, I'd had the ideas for a long time, but I've been trying to figure out how to articulate them for a long time. And I'd taken a few rough notes here and there, but I couldn't quite get both the inspiration and the wording just right. And then I woke up at 3 a.m. and I pulled out my iPad. It was all typed out on an iPad, not even a computer, in bed. And then I tweeted it off at 3:40 or something like that. And then I went back to sleep. And then I woke up in the morning and somebody was saying, wow, Naval even times his tweets. He's got it perfectly down to exactly the right time. I was like, no, that was probably the worst possible time I could have posted it. It was just like came to me in the middle of the night.
Yeah, Twitter unfortunately doesn't like letting you schedule tweet storms. They're kind of hostile to the concept, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the good stuff, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're trying to, hopefully it's timeless anyway. But yeah, there is definitely a time element to Twitter. But I kind of feel like it shouldn't matter. If you've got something good to say it while you can.
Yeah, but better to say it at all than never say it.
Yeah, every tweet of mine that I hesitated on just goes in the drafts folder and never gets sent.
Mm-hmm. Often when I actually go, okay, I have this clear in my head, I'm going to sit down and write it up now, it turns out it's a lot more stuff than I realized. It's like a lot of, well, often it's something that's pretty technical, but it'll be like this pretty long, involved technical write-up that's like, okay, here's all the high-level points on how to go about doing this kind of stuff. I unfortunately hardly get to code anymore. I like figure out what all the major issues are and how to get around them, and then explain it to other people, and they code it.
Are they good enough coders?
Yeah.
Solve the problem well? Well, okay.
Yeah.
Then you're well leveraged.
Yes. Yeah. Well, right. It for the most part would not be a terribly good use of my time for me to actually be coding. But I would like to be doing more coding. I enjoy.
Well, it's like Satoshi. I don't think coded most of the Bitcoin core client himself, but he was sufficiently obsessed with the design to get the design parameters to where he thought were correct. So I assume you're still obsessing over the design of your system.
Well, thankfully, well, for better or for worse, the consensus algorithm is set now, right? So we're following this model of trying to hopefully never do hard forks at all. So like literally the blockchain's out running, and my whole team could just vanish off the face of the earth, and the blockchain would still keep running without us, no problem. As part of that, the consensus algorithm is just set. Like there's been concrete poured into it. It's not changing, which means a whole bunch of things I was working on before, I'm not worrying about anymore. And now I'm worrying about like layer 2 stuff, like how do you actually program money? Those kinds of questions, which are a very different set of things.
All right. Well, I'm probably going to bounce out. It's getting a little late over here. So you guys can continue on, of course. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm going to take a hiatus. Good to see you all back in Clubhouse. Good to see you, Paul, keeping the engine going. Love the UI. Don't change it too much. I still don't get the paper airplane, but sure, I'll take your word for it. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Naval.
Bye.
Night, Naval.
Well, I'm kind of thinking most of the people with their hands raised had questions for Naval, so the room's probably going to clear out pretty fast. But if any of you had questions that you wanted to ask me, I'm happy to answer any of them. Give you a second to to put your hand down if you're waiting for Naval, and then I'll start taking questions.
Whenever Naval joins a room, a zillion people join after, and then like it often takes a long time for them to leave, even if people in the room are just sort of intentionally yakety-yakking nonsense to see if they can get everyone to leave. Often it takes a long time.
Yeah, I believe it. The Naval effect. I'll just start bringing people up here. We'll see.
Hello, thanks for bringing me up. I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, perfect. Yeah, I was listening to the whole Clubhouse talk. It was really nice. Thank you very much for it. I have a question because we talked a lot about focus, and also a lot of speakers, like guests, were asking how to focus their own time and work. And I have the feeling that in today's time, it's very easy to get distracted because, you know, you have access to so many things, including this Clubhouse talk. And you also develop a very, very quick fear of missing out in different areas. Let it be cryptocurrencies or maybe sometimes other things that you hear during such a Clubhouse talk, and how you can protect yourself from jumping onto something where just someone is very convincing and is basically dragging you into something that you might not even good at. That's basically my question.
Well, I think the fear of missing out is really the killer, because it's kind of this voice in your head, like, you know, what if the next great thing is right over here? And so, basically what it is pleasure seeking. So there's and I don't have any, you know, practical time management advice for anyone, but just from the the standpoint of the things that you look to fill your attention with, I would start by examining what it is that truly piques your interest when you see something that makes you click.
But I guess it's easier for some people to really focus on one thing, and for others to get very quickly distracted. And I think most of the people know if they are in one or the other side. And I just want to repeat, I think many people are here, let it be Naval or you or Bram, they they are here to seek advice in some sort of way. But when you're someone who is like can be easily convinced about something new, then you might even follow advices which are not like in your natural. Like, do you have your own ways to protect yourself from getting distracted by like being a opportunist, but like a wrong type of opportunist, like not listening to your own skills, but rather like jumping on opportunists because somebody is just very good in talking and selling you ideas?
Well, I mean, knowing what is basically